Eleanor Whitaker dropped to her knees on the splintered station platform, clutching her carpet bag, and let out a sob that cut through the burning Montana air like a blade. The train was gone. The man who promised her a home had vanished. Strangers stared like she was already ruined, and one of them spat near her boot. Before we go deeper into Nora's story, please subscribe to the channel and stay with me until the very end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now, let's begin. Eleanor Whitaker stepped down from the train, and her knees nearly gave out beneath her. She caught the iron rail just in time, knuckles white, and steadied herself on the splintered boards. Her carpet bag thudded down beside her boots. She lifted her chin the way a woman lifts a chin when she has nothing left to lose, and she looked for him. Empty. No man, no bouquet, no hat in any hand. Samuel? Her voice cracked on the second syllable. Samuel Boone. A wagon creaked somewhere behind her. A horse blew air. No one answered. A handful of men sat on the bench outside the freight office. They looked at her the way men look at a stray dog that has wandered into the wrong yard. One of them whistled low and ugly. Another spat tobacco juice in an arc that landed near the toe of her boot. Eleanor did not move. She had written to Samuel for 9 months. She had ironed the same gray traveling dress 3 times the night before she left Philadelphia. She had sold her mother's wedding ring for the ticket. She had counted every mile of the journey on the back of his last letter, the letter that said, "I will be waiting on the platform with my hat in my hand." There was no hat. There was no hand. "Ma'am?" The voice came from behind her. She turned sharp. A gray-bearded man in a sweat-darkened collar tipped his hat about an inch. No more. He held a tin clipboard against his chest like a small shield. "You waitin' on somebody." "Mr. Samuel Boone." Her voice did not tremble. She refused it. "He was to meet this train." His mouth tightened. He looked at the men on the bench. He looked at the boards at his own feet. He did not look at her. "Ma'am, I reckon you ought to come inside out of the sun." "I asked you about Mr. Boone." "I heard you." "Then answer me." He sighed. He pulled the clipboard up tighter. "Sam Boone ain't been seen in 3 weeks." Eleanor felt the platform tilt under her. She did not let it show. She had a lifetime of not letting things show. 3 weeks, she repeated. "Word is he took sick. Fever. Some folks say worse. His place is 15 miles north up by the ridge. Ain't nobody been out to check on him. Ain't nobody fixin' to." "Why not?" "Ma'am, the valley ain't a place for visitin' right now. There's troubles up that way. The kind of troubles a man minds his business about." "What kind of troubles?" He hesitated. "The kind that ain't your concern." "My intended is dying in a cabin 15 miles from here," Eleanor said. "And you tell me it isn't my concern." One of the men on the bench laughed. Eleanor did not turn her head. She had heard worse laughter than that from better men in finer cities. She had heard it from her own father the night he told her she was a burden and ought to find herself a husband before her face stopped being worth feeding. She tightened her grip on the carpet bag. "Is there a boarding house?" "Mrs. Reed runs one. 2 streets over. White shutters. Tell her Hollis sent you." "Hollis?" "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you, Mr. Hollis." He tipped his hat again. This time the inch was a full inch, and there was something behind his eyes that might have been pity if he had let it stay. Eleanor lifted the carpet bag and walked. She did not look at the men on the bench. She did not look at the loungers in the saloon doorway. She did not look at the woman who watched her from the dressmaker's window and let the curtain drop the moment Eleanor met her eyes. She walked the way her mother had taught her to walk in church. Shoulders straight, gaze level. Every step a quiet sermon. By the time she reached the white shutters, her dress was soaked through at the back, and her boots were full of grit, and she had not allowed herself a single tear. The door of the boarding house opened before she could knock. A broad-shouldered woman in a faded calico apron filled the frame, a wooden spoon in her hand. Her hair was the color of iron filings, and her eyes did not waste time. "You the one Boone was supposed to fetch?" Eleanor blinked. How did you? Honey, this town don't keep a secret longer than it takes a chicken to lay an egg. I'm Clara Reed. Get in here before that sun bakes you. Clara did not wait for an answer. She reached out, took the carpetbag from Eleanor's hand, as if she owned it already, and stepped back. Eleanor crossed the threshold. Sit down. Sit, Miss Whitaker. You been on your feet since Chicago, and you ain't foolin' nobody. Eleanor sat. Clara poured water from a stoneware pitcher into a tin cup. She handed it over without ceremony. Drink, slow. You ain't used to this air yet. Eleanor drank. The water was warm and tasted faintly of iron, and it was the best thing she had swallowed in 4 days. Now, Clara said, folding her arms. What did Hollis tell you? That Samuel has been sick. That nobody has gone to him. That there are troubles in the valley that aren't my concern. Clara snorted. Hollis is a coward, but he ain't a liar. He told you true as he dared. Then tell me the rest. The rest is that Samuel Boone is a decent man who don't deserve what's happening, and there's a fella named of Ambrose Vale who's been buying up water rights and burning out anyone who don't sell. The valley is a graveyard waiting to be dug, and Sam's homestead sits right where Vale wants a road. Then Samuel did not abandon me. No, child. Samuel is laid up burning with fever in a cabin with a roof that leaks and most likely don't even know what day it is. Then I will go to him. Clara laughed. The laugh was short and not unkind. You will you? Yes. Honey, you have been in Montana for less than an hour. You don't know one end of a horse from the other. You ain't got a rifle, a coat, or sense enough to know that nights up that ridge will freeze the marrow in your bones come September. It is July. And September comes faster than a Philadelphia girl can spell it. Eleanor stood. She was not tall. She had never been tall, but she stood the way her grandmother had stood the night the rent collector came to the door, and Clara Reed, who had seen many women stand many ways, narrowed her eyes. Mrs. Reed. Clara. I have $11.40 in my reticule. I have no return ticket. I have no family. My father told me when I boarded that train that I was no longer his daughter, and I believed him because he meant it. Samuel Boone is the only man in this country who has ever written my name on a piece of paper and asked me to come. He asked you to come because he was desperate. I know. Clara stopped. Her arms unfolded. You know. I have known since the second letter. A man who is not desperate does not advertise for a wife in a Philadelphia paper. I am not a fool, Clara. I came anyway. Why? Eleanor's jaw worked. For a moment, the dust on her cheek looked like it might be cut by something. It was not. Because a desperate man and a desperate woman might make something neither of them could make alone. And because I would rather die on a ridge that might one day be mine than die in a tenement that belongs to a landlord who calls me girl. Clara was quiet for a long count. Then she nodded. Once. Upstairs. First door on the left. Wash your face. I'll bring you supper at 6. I cannot pay. Did I ask you for money? No. Then hush. Eleanor climbed the stairs. She set the carpetbag down beside the bed. She unpinned her hat. She caught sight of herself in the spotted mirror above the basin and did not recognize the woman she saw. She washed her face. Then she sat on the edge of the bed, and only then, with no one to see, did she fold forward, press both hands hard against her mouth, and weep without sound. She wept for the train that had carried her 4 days and would not carry her back. She wept for her mother dead 9 years. She wept for the cruel laugh of the man on the bench. She wept for Samuel Boone 15 miles away in a leaking cabin burning with fever, who had written her name in a steady hand and meant it. She did not weep long. She had never been given the luxury of weeping long. By the time the supper bell rang, her face was washed twice, and her hair was pinned, and her hands had stopped shaking. She went down. Clara had set a plate at the end of the long table. Bread, salt pork, beans, a wedge of yellow cheese. Eleanor ate every bite. She had not known she was hungry. She had not allowed herself to know. Clara watched her eat without comment. When Eleanor set the fork down, Clara said, "There's a man coming to see you tonight." A man. Wyatt Harlan. I do not know the name. You wouldn't. He don't talk much and he don't go where there's people, but he knows Sam's place. He knows the ridge. And he come in from his camp an hour ago asking if the bride had got off the train. How did he know there was a bride? Same way I did, same way Hollis did, same way the men on the bench did. This town don't keep secrets, Miss Whitaker. I told you. Why would he come? Clara's mouth pulled to one side. That's a question I've been asking myself for 10 years about Wyatt Harlan. I have never got a clean answer, but he ain't a bad man. I will say that much. There's worse men in this country, and most of 'em hold offices. Eleanor folded her napkin slowly. When will he come? After dark. He don't like daylight much. The war took something out of him and he never come back for it. What war? The only one that mattered in his life. He scouted for the Union cavalry. He saw things. He come home, and his mother was buried, and his brother was buried, and his sweetheart had married a man who stayed behind. He don't talk about any of it. But he don't drink, he don't steal, and he don't lie. In this country, that puts him a head taller than most. Eleanor was quiet. Clara. Yes. If he tells me I cannot go to Samuel, I will go anyway. I know that child. How? Because I have seen women come off that train for 20 years. I can tell within 5 minutes which ones will leave on the next train and which ones will be buried in this dirt. You ain't leavin'. The knock came after the lamps were lit. 3 knocks, spaced, not loud. Clara crossed the hall and opened the door. The man who stepped in did not take his hat off all the way. He tipped it. He stayed inside the doorway. He was tall, lean dust on his coat, a gun belt riding low on his hip, in the way of a man who had worn one long enough to forget he was wearing it. His eyes were the color of weathered slate, and they found Eleanor across the room before Clara could speak. Miss Whitaker. Mr. Harlan. He took 2 steps in. He did not sit. He did not move closer to her. He stood hat in hand now, and the slow turning of the brim between his fingers was the only thing about him that moved. I reckon you've been told what's what. I have been told that Samuel is sick. He's worse than sick. How much worse? Wyatt's jaw shifted. I rode out 2 days ago. I left water by the door and a sack of meal. He drank some. He didn't eat. He don't know my name no more. He called me by his daddy's. That's the kind of fever that don't always lift. Eleanor's hands found each other in her lap. She held them still. Then I must go to him tonight. No, ma'am. Mr. Harlan, tonight you sleep. Tomorrow at first light I'll take you up the ridge if you still mean to go. But you don't ride a road like that in the dark with a stranger you met an hour ago. Not with what's loose in that valley. What is loose in that valley? He did not answer at once. He looked at Clara. Clara nodded. He looked back at Eleanor. Ma'am, there's a man named Vale. He wants the water that runs through Sam's land. He offered Sam money. Sam refused. Then he offered less. Sam refused. Now he don't offer. He waits. He has men who ride at night. They have already burned 2 cabins in that valley this summer. They have killed a dog. They shot at a Mexican farmer's wife and missed her by less than the width of my hand. They will not stop until Sam is dead, or until he sells, or until somebody puts a bullet in Vale's chest and there ain't a court in this territory that will do the last one. And Samuel. Samuel cannot lift his head off the pillow. Then he cannot defend his land. No, ma'am. And if I go up there? If you go up there, Miss Whitaker, you take on what he can't carry. And if you do that, you ought to know now what you are walking into, because it ain't a wedding, it's a war. The clock ticked. Eleanor looked at her hands. She looked at the door. She looked finally at Wyatt Harlan, whose eyes had not left her face. Mr. Harlan? Ma'am. In Philadelphia, I sewed for a woman who paid me 8 cents an hour. She paid me less when the cloth was hard. She paid me nothing when I bled on the silk. My father drank what I earned. The last night I lived under his roof, he told me I was a burden, and he meant it, and he was not wrong, because I had nothing to give a house except my hands. I sold my mother's ring to buy a ticket to a man I had never met, because that man, dying as he is, wrote my name in his own hand and asked me to come. Yes, ma'am. I will not go back. I have nothing to go back to. The platform in Philadelphia is no different from the platform in this town, except that here at least one man wanted me to come. Wyatt's hands stopped turning the hat. Then I'll die somewhere that might become mine. Clara turned away. She busied herself with the stove that did not need her. Her shoulders were stiff. Wyatt Harlan looked at Eleanor Whitaker for a long count of seconds. Then he set his hat back on his head low over his eyes. First light, ma'am. First light. I'll bring you a coat. The one you got won't last past sundown on the ridge. Thank you. He turned. He paused with his hand on the door. He spoke without looking back. Miss Whitaker. Yes, Mr. Harlan. There's men in this town will say tomorrow that you went up that ridge with 2 men and no preacher. They will say worse before the month is out. I ain't a man who tells a woman what she can stand, but you ought to know what's coming. I have been called worse in better dresses, Mr. Harlan. His shoulders moved. It might have been a laugh. It might not have. He stepped out and shut the door behind him without a sound. Clara turned from the stove. She looked at Eleanor for a long moment. Then she said, "Child, get some sleep. You are going to need every hour of it." Eleanor climbed the stairs. She did not weep again. She sat on the edge of the bed and unpinned her hair and braided it the way her mother had braided it the year before she died. She set the braid over her shoulder. She blew out the lamp. She lay in the dark and listened to a wind that ran along the eaves of a town that did not want her. And she thought of a man 15 miles north in a cabin with a roof that leaked burning with a fever that did not yet know her name. Eleanor Whitaker closed her eyes. She did not sleep for a long time. But when sleep finally came, her hands were folded across her chest, like a woman who had already decided what she would die for, and she was not afraid. Wyatt knocked at the door before the rooster. Eleanor was already dressed. She had been dressed for an hour. She had braided her hair tight against her skull the way her mother had braided hair before a long day in the laundry. Her carpet-bag stood at the foot of the bed. She came down the stairs without sound. Clara was at the stove. She held out a folded square of cloth. Biscuits, 2. Eat one on the ride, save the other for him. Clara, don't. Eleanor took the cloth. There's a canteen by the door. There's a rifle leanin' beside it. The rifle ain't loaded. You don't know how. Wyatt will load it for you when you get there. He will also show you how to put it down again so you don't kill the wrong man. Clara, yes. If I am not back in a week. You ain't coming back. I told you. Get on. Eleanor stepped outside. Wyatt sat on a sorrel horse in the half-dark, holding the reins of a heavy bay mare with a deep chest and a patient eye. A coat was folded across the saddle. Mornin', ma'am. Mr. Harlan? You ever sat a horse? I have ridden a pony once. I was 9. This ain't a pony. I see that. He swung down. He set the coat over her shoulders without touching her, then bent and laced his hands together by her boot. Step, easy, don't kick. She stepped. She did not kick. She came up over the saddle and gripped the horn with both hands. The mare did not move. Her name is June. She's been to this ranch 18 times. You couldn't lose her if you tried. And if I fall, you won't fall. June won't let you. He swung back up. 15 miles. 6 hours at this pace. 3 creek crossings. 2 ridges. 1 stretch where a man could put a bullet in us if he wanted to. If I tell you to get down, you get down. If I tell you to ride, you ride, and you do not look back, and you do not stop until June stops by herself. Yes, Mr. Harlan? And one more thing, ma'am. Yes. If we meet a man on the road, and he asks who you are, you say you are my cousin from St. Louis, come to nurse a sick neighbor. Why? Because if you say bride, half the men in this valley will think you are alone, and the other half will think you are weak, and not one of them will think both at the same time. Cousin keeps them guessing. Cousin from St. Louis. Yes, ma'am. They rode. For the first hour, neither spoke. Eleanor learned the rhythm of the mare's walk. She learned to let her hips move with the saddle instead of against it. She learned that the back of her neck would burn before the sun was a hand high. She did not complain. She had not complained for 31 years. She was not going to start in the saddle of a borrowed horse. The first creak came at the bottom of a long slope. Wyatt held up a hand. He sat his horse and listened for a long count of seconds before he motioned her forward. "Anything," she said. "No." "Then why?" "Because the day I stop listening is the day they put me in the ground." He nudged the sorrel into the water. June followed without prompting. On the far bank, Wyatt swung down and tightened a strap on her saddle that Eleanor had not noticed was loose. "You said 3 creaks." "I did." "And 1 stretch." "I did." "Which one is the stretch?" "You'll know." They rode. The second hour was hotter. Eleanor ate the biscuit. She offered Wyatt half. He shook his head. "Save it. For him." "There are 2. "Save them both. He ain't eaten in days." "You said he didn't eat the meal you left." "He didn't. He needs something softer. A biscuit broke up in water will go down. Bread that's a day old mashed up with sugar will go down. You'll see." "How do you know?" "My brother died of a fever when I was 12. He said it the way a man says the price of a horse." "I'm sorry, Mr. Harlan." "Long time ago, ma'am." She tried twice to ask him another question. Both times the question fell apart in her mouth before it reached her teeth. He was not a man who invited talk, but he was also not a man who killed it. He let the silence sit between them like a third rider, and Eleanor began to understand that this was how he listened to a country. The stretch came after the second creak. She felt it before he spoke. The sorrel's ears went forward. The mare's head came up. Wyatt's right hand drifted to the hammer of the rifle in his scabbard, and it stayed there. "Eyes on June's ears, ma'am." "What does that mean?" "It means if her ears go flat, you grip that horn with both hands, and you let her run." "What about you?" "I will take care of myself, ma'am." They rode for 20 minutes in a silence that was not silence. It was a held breath. Eleanor's hands hurt from gripping the horn. She made herself loosen them. She made herself breathe. A crow lifted out of a stand of cottonwoods to the east. Wyatt's hand stayed on the hammer for another full minute after the crow had gone. Then it dropped. Past it. What was it? "Nothing today." "And tomorrow?" "Tomorrow we will find out tomorrow, ma'am." They cleared the third creek before noon. "His place is over that shoulder," Wyatt said. "You will see the smoke first, then the roof, then the corral. The corral fence is down on the north side. The barn lost half its shingles in a wind last March. Don't expect a wedding gift, ma'am." "I am not expecting one." "Good." They crested the rise. Eleanor saw the homestead, and her breath caught somewhere behind her ribs. It was worse than worse. The cabin slumped to one side. The corral fence was down on 3 sides, not 1. A milk cow stood inside the broken pen because she had not figured out she could leave. A dead chicken lay near the well in a circle of feathers. No smoke rose from the chimney. Wyatt saw her face. "He was alive yesterday, ma'am." "You said 2 days. I rode back yesterday, from the rim. I did not go down. I saw the cow had not been milked. I saw the door was closed. I knew he was in there. I came back to town to find you." "Why did you not go down?" "Because if he was dead, I wanted somebody who loved him to be the one to find him. Not me." Eleanor's hands shook on the reins. She made them stop. "Ride." They rode down the slope. She was off the mare before Wyatt could come around to help. She crossed the yard in 8 long strides, her skirt gathered in one fist, and she did not knock. She pushed the door open with her shoulder. The smell hit her like a wall. A figure on the bed twisted in a wet blanket, his face turned away. "Samuel." He did not answer. Eleanor crossed to him. She set her hand on his forehead and pulled it back as if she had touched a stove. "Mr. Harlan?" "Ma'am." "Water? Cold water? From the well? Fast." "Yes, ma'am." He was already moving. Eleanor knelt by the bed. She turned Samuel's face toward her. His lips were cracked, his eyes were sunken, his pulse fluttered under her thumb like a moth that had given up. "Samuel Boone, you listen to me. I am Eleanor Whitaker. I came on the train. I am here. You hear me?" A whisper that was not a word. "You hear me, Mr. Boone?" His eyelids moved. "Good. You stay here. You stay with me. I did not come 2,200 miles to bury you on the first day." She stripped the wet blanket off him with the efficient hands of a woman who had washed sick neighbors for a tenement landlord in exchange for half her rent. She covered him with a clean sheet she found folded on a high shelf. Wyatt came in with 2 buckets. "There's a tin tub out back," he said. "Half busted. It'll hold. Drag it in. Put it by the fire. We will not get him in it, but we will use the water." "Yes, ma'am." For the next 4 hours, Eleanor did not speak in sentences. She gave orders in 2 and 3 words. Wyatt did not argue with one of them. He hauled water. He built a fire. He cracked open the windows. He stripped off his coat and rolled up his sleeves and worked beside her like a man who had done this kind of work before, and not by choice. By dusk, Samuel's fever had broken twice and come back once. Eleanor sat on a stool by the bed and held his hand. "Mr. Harlan." "Ma'am." "He is going to live." "Yes, ma'am." "Do not tell me yes, ma'am, if you do not believe it." A pause. "I believe he might, Miss Whitaker. I would not have said that this morning." "Then say it now." "He might live, ma'am." "Thank you." Wyatt nodded. He went outside to see to the horses. Eleanor sat alone with Samuel Boone for the first time in her life. He was thinner than his letters had promised. His hair had more gray than a man of 34 should have. His hands were the hands of a man who had worked and worked and worked and still lost. She did not know him. She had crossed a continent for him. She set his hand down gently on the blanket. She rose. She went to the small table by the window where she had seen a tin box. She opened it. Letters. Her letters. All 9 months of them. Tied with a strip of leather. Read so many times the edges were soft as cloth. She set them down. She went back to the bed. She sat. She watched a man she did not know breathe in and out. "You wrote me back," she said soft. "Every time. You wrote me back." He did not stir. "That is enough, Samuel Boone. For tonight, that is enough." Wyatt did not sleep that night. He took the chair by the door and sat in it with the rifle across his knees and his eyes half shut, which was the way he slept and the way he watched, and Eleanor could not tell which was which. She did not sleep either. She sat by the bed. Toward the 3rd hour after midnight, Samuel opened his eyes. He looked at her, his mouth shaped a word, then another. "Who?" "Eleanor." "Eleanor." "Whitaker. From Philadelphia." A long silence. "You came." "Yes, Mr. Boone." "I told you not to." "You did not, sir." "I meant to." "You did not." His eyes closed again. "I am sorry, Miss Whitaker." "Do not be." "I am sorry." "Mr. Boone, listen to me." "Yes. You did not bring me here under false promise. You wrote me what you had. You told me the cabin needed work. You told me you owed money. You told me the country was hard. You told me you were not a young man. You told me everything, and I came anyway. Do not apologize to me for the cabin. Apologize to me for not meeting the train if you must, but only because it gave the men on the bench an hour to feel clever. A sound that might have been a laugh. It came out of him like a stone out of a well. "The men on the bench." "They are not your concern, sir." "They are." "Sleep, Mr. Boone." He slept. In the morning, Wyatt rode out and came back with a goat and a sack of cornmeal and 3 onions and a chunk of side bacon, and would not say what he had paid for them. Eleanor made a broth. She fed Samuel 2 spoonfuls. He kept them down. She fed him 2 more. He kept those down. By the 3rd day, he could sit up. By the 4th, he could speak full sentences and remember what he had said the hour before. By the 5th, he tried to stand, and Eleanor pushed him back into the chair with one hand on his chest, and the kind of look her mother had used on a drunk uncle. You will sit, Mr. Boone. I have work. You have a wife who has been doing it. He stopped. His eyes filled. He looked down at his hands. You ain't my wife yet, ma'am. That is a thing of paper. It is a thing of God. God will keep until you can stand without falling, sir. Sit. He sat. Eleanor went outside. She did not let him see her face change. Wyatt was at the corral splicing a length of wire with 2 pairs of pliers, and a patience that did not belong in any man she had known. Mr. Harlan? Ma'am? He believes he owes me an apology for not being well enough to marry me. He would, ma'am. I do not want a paper marriage from a man who is grateful. Wyatt did not look up. What do you want, Miss Whitaker? I want a piece of ground that no man can take from me. I want a roof that does not leak. I want a milk cow that has not been kicked. I want to be the one who feeds the chickens and the one who decides which chicken goes into the pot. I want, Mr. Harlan, what every woman I have ever known has wanted and never had. I want a life that is mine. That ain't a small thing, ma'am. No, sir, it is not. He bent the wire. He twisted it. He tested the splice with both hands. He spoke without looking at her. Then we will get you that, ma'am, or we will die trying. She did not answer. She did not have to. The riders came on the 8th day. 3 of them. They came up the road slow the way men come who want a homesteader to see them coming. They did not draw weapons. They did not raise their voices. They rode to the gate, and the man in the middle, a heavy-set man in a black coat, too good for the country, tipped his hat about an inch. Mornin'. Wyatt was already on the porch. The rifle was in his hands but not raised. Eleanor stepped out of the cabin. She had her own hands folded at her waist, and she had practiced the folding for an hour the night before because she had known this day would come. Mornin', she said. The man in the black coat smiled. The smile did not reach his eyes. You'd be the Boone bride. I am Eleanor Whitaker. Ambrose Vale, ma'am. At your service. I have heard your name, Mr. Vale. I'd reckon you have. He swung down. The 2 men behind him did not. They sat their horses and did not look at her. They looked at Wyatt. Wyatt did not look back. I come to see Sam, Vale said. Mr. Boone is recovering. From the fever. From the fever. Then I won't keep him long. I have a proposition for him that he will want to hear, ma'am. You have made him propositions before Mr. Vale. A pause. The smile widened just a hair. News travels. It does. This one is different. Tell it to me, Mr. Vale, and I will tell it to him. Ma'am, with respect, this is a matter between men. Then leave it for a man, sir, but I do not see one on this property who wishes to speak with you. The 2 riders behind Vale shifted in their saddles. Wyatt did not shift. Vale's smile thinned. Miss Whitaker, I will be plain. Sam Boone owes the bank $312. The note comes due in November. He will not have it. He will not come close to having it. I am offering him $400 cash for this claim today in coin. That is enough to pay the note, leave him $88 walk-in money, and let him start over in Bozeman or wherever a sick man cares to die. You are very kind, Mr. Vale. I am businesslike, ma'am. You are not. A businessman would offer the value of the land. The water that crosses this claim is worth 10 times $400 to your cattle operation, and you and I both know it, and so does every man within 50 miles. Vale's eyes narrowed. You have a sharp tongue, Miss Whitaker. I have a tongue, sir. The sharpness is a thing you brought yourself. Sam will see it different. Mr. Boone will see it however he sees it when he is well, and at that time, if he wishes to speak with you, he will send for you. Until then, sir, you have ridden a long way for nothing, and I am sorry for the trip. A long silence. Vale looked at Wyatt. Harlan? Mr. Vale. You sidin' with this woman. I am standin' on this porch, Mr. Vale. That ain't an answer. It is the only one you are gettin' today. Vale put his foot back in the stirrup. He swung up. He looked at Eleanor. The smile was gone. Miss Whitaker, I will say this once. and I will say it plain. This country don't favor women who do not understand the size of the room they are standing in. You are in a small room, ma'am. You think you are in a parlor. You are in a closet. And the door, ma'am, ain't on your side of it. Then I will be the door, Mr. Vale." He stared. Then he wheeled the horse, and the three of them rode out at a walk, because men like Vale do not gallop, because men like Vale want a woman to count every hoofbeat going away. Wyatt let the rifle down only after the dust had settled. He did not speak for a full minute. Then he said, "Ma'am." "Yes, Mr. Harlan." "You just made an enemy of the worst man between here and Helena." "I know it, sir." "And you did it without raising your voice." "I did it because raising my voice would have meant I cared what he thought of it." Wyatt looked at her. For the first time since she had met him, something moved in the back of his eyes that was neither pity nor caution. It was respect. He said only, "I'd best ride to town for shells. We will need 'em before the week is out." "Yes, Mr. Harlan." "Will you be all right alone, ma'am?" Mr. Harlan. "Yes. I have been alone for 31 years. I will be all right for an afternoon." He almost smiled. He did not quite, but it was the closest his face had come to it. He rode out at a trot. By the time he came back after dark with a sack of shells and a side of bacon and a piece of paper folded twice in his coat pocket. Eleanor had milked the goat, fed Samuel 2 more bowls of broth, scrubbed the cabin floor to the boards, mended the worst tear in the curtain over the back window, and learned how to load the rifle by watching Wyatt's hands the day before, and copying every motion in her head until they made sense. She had not fired it. She would fire it within the week. But that night, she did not know that yet. That night when Wyatt came up the steps and set the sack down and pulled the folded paper out of his coat, she only said, "What is that, Mr. Harlan?" "It was nailed to the post outside Mrs. Reed's boarding house when I rode in, ma'am." He held it out. Eleanor took it. She unfolded it under the lamp. She read it once. She read it twice. She read it a third time because the woman who had written it in a clean schoolroom. Hand the kind of hand a deacon's wife learns at 12, and the words had been chosen carefully. The paper said, "The Boone woman is no bride. She is a fallen woman from the East. She lives in a house with 2 men and no preacher. Decent folk will not trade with her. Decent folk will not greet her on the road. Decent folk will not let her near their children. Signed, the women of this town." Eleanor folded the paper. She set it on the table. She did not cry. She did not flinch. She did not look at Wyatt. She walked to the bed where Samuel slept, and she stood over him for a long time, and then she came back and she sat in the chair, and she said very quietly, "Mr. Harlan." "Ma'am." "How many women signed it?" "I don't know, ma'am. There were no names." "Then they were all of them." "Or none, ma'am. A coward is the same number written down." Eleanor laughed. It was the first time he had heard her laugh, and it was not a happy sound, but it was a true one, and it surprised them both. "Mr. Harlan?" "Yes." "Tomorrow I will ride into town. I will go to the general store. I will buy flour and sugar and a paper of needles. I will walk past every woman in the street, and I will tip my chin to every one of them, and I will not look away first." "Yes, ma'am." "And if any one of them speaks to me, what is on that paper?" "Yes, ma'am." "I will answer her in front of God in the street, and she will not forget it, sir." Wyatt set his hat down on the table. He sat. He folded his arms over his chest. He looked at the floor. Then he looked up. "Miss Whittaker." "Yes." "I have been wrong about a thing, ma'am." "What thing, Mr. Harlan?" "I thought the night I rode in to meet you that you would last a week." "And now?" "Now, ma'am, I am beginning to think that this valley will last a week, and you will still be standing when the dust clears." Eleanor did not answer. She picked up the folded paper from the table. She held it over the lamp's chimney until the edge caught. She did not let go until the flame had taken the last word and the ash had fallen into the saucer she had set there for it. And her hand was steady, and her face was the face of a woman who had been called many things and would not be called this one quietly. In a cabin that did not leak as much as it had a week before, in a room that smelled of soap and broth instead of fever. A man slept whose name had been written on a piece of paper in a steady hand 9 months before, and a woman sat by his bed and did not let go of his hand, and a third figure sat by the door with a rifle across his knees and watched a darkness that had begun at last to take her seriously. The morning came. Eleanor pinned her hair before sunrise. She put on the gray dress that had survived 4 days on a train and 1 bad ride up a ridge, and she brushed it twice, and she did not look in the mirror because she knew what she would see, and she did not need to be told. She came out of the cabin. Samuel was sitting up in a chair by the door. He had pulled himself there alone in the night. His hands trembled on the armrests, but he was sitting. "Mr. Boone? Miss Whitaker? You should be in bed. And you should be in Philadelphia." She stopped. He looked up at her. His eyes were clearer than they had been since she had walked through the door. "You're going into town." "I am. Because of the paper." "You know about the paper." "I've been awake longer than you reckon, ma'am." "Then you know I cannot stay here under it." "I know you cannot know." A long silence. He reached out. His hand was thin. He set it on the back of hers lightly, the way a man sets a bird on a branch. "Eleanor." "Yes, Samuel." "If they hurt you in that town today." "They will not, sir." "If they do, I want you to come back here, and I want you to tell me, and I will go to that town on the next horse I can sit, and there will not be a paper nailed to any post in this country for the rest of my life. Do you hear me, ma'am?" "I hear you, Mr. Boone." "Good." He took his hand back. "Now go on. Don't keep Harlan waitin'. He has been pacin' for an hour." She rode out with Wyatt. She did not ride pillion this time. She rode June alone, and her hands on the reins were steadier than they had been the day she came up the ridge, and Wyatt rode beside her at a walk and did not say a word for the first mile. "Mr. Harlan?" "Ma'am." "I want you to do something today." "Anything you ask, ma'am." "I want you to stay outside the store when I go in." "Ma'am." "I want you on the boardwalk where every man can see you, but I do not want you in the store. If I have a fight to make today, I will make it without a rifle at my shoulder, or it is not a fight I will have won." A long pause. "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you, Mr. Harlan." "I do not like it, ma'am." "I know it." "I will not be far." "I know that too." They rode into town at 9:30. The boardwalks were not empty. Word travels in a country with one road. Eleanor felt the eyes the moment they hit the first cross street. Men in doorways, women in upper windows, a child pulled inside by the arm before they had passed. She tipped her chin to every one of them. She did not look away first. Wyatt swung down at the hitching post outside the general store. He gave her his hand to dismount. She took it. She set her foot down, and she let go. "Outside, sir?" "Outside, ma'am." She walked up the 3 boards of the step. She opened the door. The bell over it rang. She stepped through. There were 6 women in the store. 5 of them turned their backs. 1 did not. She was a small woman, no taller than Eleanor, in a dress patched at both elbows. Her hair was pulled back so tight it pulled at her temples. She held a tin of saleratus in one hand and a paper of pins in the other, and she stood her ground. The man behind the counter did not look up. "Mr. Pierce," Eleanor said. He did not look up. "Mr. Pierce, I would like a pound of flour, a pound of sugar, and a paper of needles, please." He kept his eyes on the ledger. "Don't reckon we got what you need, ma'am." "I see flour on the shelf behind you, sir. I see sugar in the bin beside it. I see needles in the case at your left hand." "Don't reckon we got 'em for sale today, ma'am." The 5 women with their backs to her did not turn. One of them shifted her shoulders. Eleanor set her reticule on the counter. She opened it. She took out 3 silver coins. She set them on the wood between her and the storekeeper. "This is 40 cents, Mr. Pierce. It is 40 cents too much for what I have asked you for. The remainder is for the next customer who lacks it. I would like my flour, my sugar, and my needles, please." He did not look up. "Ma'am." "Yes, Mr. Pierce." "I cannot." "You can, sir. You will not." Those are different words and we both know it. A silence. The small woman with the patched elbows took one step forward. She did not say a thing. She set her saleratus tin on the counter beside Eleanor's silver. She set her paper of pins beside it. She took 2 coins out of her own pocket and laid them on top of Eleanor's. She looked at the storekeeper. "You sell me my goods, Mr. Pierce, and the ladies, or my husband who shod your horse last Tuesday for nothing because you said cash was scarce will hear about it before his supper." Pierce looked up. The small woman's chin did not move. "Mrs. Doolin." "Mr. Pierce, I do not want a quarrel." "You will not have a quarrel, sir. You will have a sale, 2 of them, and you will say good morning to the lady because she came to your door like a Christian." 5 backs in the store stayed turned. But Mrs. Doolin's chin did not move. Pierce reached behind him. He took down the flour. He scooped the sugar. He counted the needles. He did not say good morning, but he took the coins. Eleanor turned. She looked at Mrs. Doolin. "Ma'am?" "Don't thank me, Miss Whitaker. I did it because I was raised by a mother who'd have whipped me bloody for doing less." "Then I thank your mother, ma'am." A flicker. A real one. Almost a smile. "My mother would have liked you, ma'am. She did not like much." Eleanor lifted her parcel. She walked out. Wyatt was on the boardwalk where she had left him. He did not ask. He saw her face. He did not need to ask. They rode for half a mile in silence before she spoke. "Mr. Harlan." "Ma'am?" "There was one." "Yes, ma'am." "Her name is Doolin. Her husband is a smith." "I know him, ma'am. He is a good man." "There will be more." "Maybe so, ma'am." "There will be, sir." They saw the smoke before they cleared the second ridge. It was thin. It was wrong. It rose from the wrong angle on the wrong slope, and Wyatt's hand was on the rifle before Eleanor had finished registering it. "The Halloran place," he said. "How far?" "Half a mile west of Sam's." "Ride." They rode hard. The Halloran cabin was a black, smoking ruin. A woman sat in the yard with a baby in her lap. She was not crying. She was past crying. Her 2 older children stood beside her like fence posts. Wyatt was off his horse before it had stopped. "Mrs. Halloran?" "Mr. Harlan." "Where is he?" "In the barn." "Hurt." "Dead." Wyatt's jaw locked. Eleanor was off June. She crossed the yard. She knelt by the woman. She did not reach for her. She had been a poor woman in a poor city long enough to know that a woman in shock does not want to be touched until she asks. "Mrs. Halloran." "Ma'am." "My name is Eleanor Whitaker. I am at the Boone place. I am going to take you and your children there tonight. You will sleep under a roof. You will eat what is in our pot. We will bury Mr. Halloran in the morning on ground that has not been burned. Do you hear me, ma'am?" The woman looked at her for the first time. Her eyes were dry and bright and far away. They came at dawn. How many? 4. Their faces. Covered. Their horses. One was the gray with the white sock. Vale's foreman rides that horse. I have seen him at the freight office. Did you see the foreman's face? No, ma'am. Will you say in a court that you saw that horse? I will say it on a Bible in front of God, ma'am, if a court is willing to call me. It will be, ma'am. I promise you that. The woman did not nod. She did not weep. She only handed the baby to Eleanor without a word because her arms had been holding it for 4 hours and they could not hold it any longer. Eleanor took the child. Wyatt came out of the burned barn. His face had gone the color of cold iron. Eleanor. She looked up. She had not heard her own name out of his mouth before. "Yes. We need to ride. Now. All of us. Sam's place is the only one with walls left on this side of the valley, and if they hit Halloran's first, they are working a line. Then they will hit us next. They will hit us tonight." She stood. She did not let go of the child. "Mr. Harlan?" "Ma'am, ride to every farm between here and the river. Tell every man and every widow with a rifle that there is a war on the ridge tonight, and that the woman they wrote a paper about is opening her door to anyone who will sleep behind it. Tell them I do not ask for love. I ask for guns. I ask for hands. I ask for one more cabin standin' when the sun comes up tomorrow than was standin' when it went down today. Yes, ma'am. Go. He went. By dusk, there were 11 adults at the Boone homestead. 2 were widows. 1 was a Mexican farmer with a face like cracked leather and a Henry rifle older than Eleanor. 1 was the German blacksmith named Doolin, who had ridden out with his wife, the small woman from the store. 1 was a boy of 14 named Tobias, with a squirrel gun, who would not be parted from his dead father's powder horn. 2 were brothers who farmed the bottom land and had been threatened twice. Mrs. Halloran sat by the fire with her children pressed against her, and she did not let go of any of them, and she did not speak. Samuel had risen from his chair. He stood by the door with his own rifle in his hands, and he did not waver, and Eleanor did not tell him to sit. There was a thing in his eyes that had not been there a day before, and a woman did not put that thing back in the box once it was out. Eleanor stood in the middle of her own front room. She set her hand on the table. She looked at every face. I have not been in this country long, she said. I am a stranger to most of you. Some of you have called me names this week. Some of you signed a paper. I do not hold it. I would have signed it myself if I had been you and not known me. A silence. But I will tell you what I have learned in 8 days on this ridge. I have learned that there is a man named Vale who will burn every roof in this valley before the snow flies if we let him. I have learned that he will do it one cabin at a time because he believes that a woman who watches her neighbor's house burn will be glad it was not her own. I have learned, ma'am, sir, that he is wrong about that because I have watched a roof burn today, and I am not glad. Mrs. Halloran's baby made a small sound. You thought I was alone because I came here with nothing. But people with nothing are the ones who learn how to stand together, sir. Ma'am, all of you. We are the people who have nothing. And that means we are the people who have each other, and a man like Vale will never understand that, because he has never owned a thing he did not pay coin for. Doolin the blacksmith said soft, Amen, ma'am. Tonight they will come, Eleanor said. Mr. Harlan and Mr. Boone will tell you where to stand. You will do as they say. You will not fire until I do. If I am dead before I fire, you will fire when Mr. Harlan does. If he is dead, you will fire when Mr. Doolin does. If we are all dead, you will burn this cabin yourselves before you let them take it standin'. The Mexican farmer crossed himself. The boy with the squirrel gun set his jaw. The widow nearest the fire said, Yes, ma'am. And she was the woman who 2 days before had pulled her child off the boardwalk so that the child would not have to look at Eleanor. Eleanor did not mention it. They came at midnight. 6 riders, maybe 7. They came up the road at a gallop the way men come who think a house is alone, and they fired at the cabin from 100 yards out, and they kept coming. Eleanor was on her belly behind a rain barrel. The rifle was at her shoulder. Wyatt had loaded it for her 3 times that day. She knew its weight. She knew its kick. She knew she had 2 shots before she would need to work the lever, and she knew that if she missed both, a man would be at the porch before she could reload. Wyatt fired first. The lead horse went down. The man on it rolled and did not get up. The other riders fanned out. Eleanor squeezed the trigger. She had aimed at the broad chest of a man on a roan horse, and she did not look to see if she had hit him, because Wyatt had told her 3 times that a woman who looks at what she has done is a woman who does not fire her second shot. She fired her second shot. The Mexican farmer was firing from the south corner. The blacksmith was firing from the north. The boy with the squirrel gun did not fire. He could not. His hands shook. His father was 3 weeks in the ground, and his hands shook, and Eleanor saw it and said nothing, because there was no shame in a boy of 14 whose hands shook. The barn caught. A torch. The roof went up in a sheet of yellow. Cow! Wyatt shouted. The cow! Mrs. Doolin was already running. She was a small woman in a patched dress, and she ran through the bullets like she did not see them, and she threw open the back of the burning barn, and the milk cow ran past her into the dark with her tail on fire, and the goat ran after, and Mrs. Doolin staggered out, coughing with her sleeve smoldering, and her husband fired 3 times into the dark and put down the man who had thrown the torch. A scream. Not a man's scream. A child's. Eleanor was on her feet before she had decided to be. Tobias was on the porch with a hole in his thigh. He had stood up. He had stood up to fire, and he had fired, and a bullet had taken him low, and he was sitting on the boards, holding his leg with both hands, like a child holds a cut knee, and the blood was coming through his fingers, black in the moonlight. Eleanor was beside him. "Look at me. Look at me, son. Tobias, look at me." "Ma'am? You are not going to die tonight." "Ma'am, it hurts." "I know it hurts. I am going to put my hands on it now, and I am going to press, and you are going to let me. You hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." She pressed. She pressed both hands down hard on a boy's leg, and the blood came up between her fingers warm, and she did not look away from his face, because she had learned in 8 days that a woman who looks away first is a woman who has already lost. A man came around the corner of the cabin. He was not one of theirs. He had a pistol. He raised it. He was 3 yards from Eleanor, and the boy and Eleanor's rifle was on the porch behind her, and her hands were full of a child's blood, and there was no time. Samuel. Samuel Boone, who had not stood without help for 10 days, who had not lifted a rifle in 3 weeks, who should have been in a chair by the fire, and not on his own front porch. Samuel fired from the doorway. Once. The man with the pistol went down and stayed down. Eleanor did not look. She pressed. "Tobias, Tobias, stay with me. Stay with me, son." "Yes, ma'am." It was over in 11 minutes. It felt like 2 hours. It felt like 4. It felt like a thing that would not end. But Wyatt counted it later by the clock on Sam's mantel, and it was 11 minutes from the first shot to the last. 4 of Vale's men were dead in the yard. 1 was wounded and crawling toward the road. The rest had ridden out because men who ride for pay do not die for pay if they can help it. The Mexican farmer was dead. He had taken a bullet under the arm in the first volley, and he had kept firing, and he had killed 2 men before he had gone down, and they found him on his side, with his rifle still in his hand, and his face turned toward the sky. And the widow nearest the fire, who was his sister, knelt by him, and did not weep, because she had used her weeping 11 years before, when their other brother had been killed by the army in Sonora. Tobias did not die. Eleanor bandaged his leg with strips of her own petticoat, and Mrs. Doolin held him while she did it, and the boy bit a piece of leather and did not cry out, and when it was over, Eleanor put her forehead against his forehead and held it there for 1 long count of seconds, and then she stood up and washed the blood off her hands in a bucket of well water that was still cold. Wyatt found her at the bucket. "Eleanor." "Yes." "You killed a man." "I know. He had a rifle on his shoulder when you fired. He was about to put a bullet through the rain barrel and into your back, ma'am." "I know it, Mr. Harlan." "I needed you to know." "I know, sir. I knew when I fired." A pause. "Eleanor." "Yes." "It does not get easier, ma'am. I am sorry." "I did not expect it to, sir." He did not say anything more. He did not need to. They buried the Mexican farmer at sunrise. His sister sang a song in a language Eleanor did not know, and Doolin the blacksmith stood with his hat in his hand, and Samuel Boone leaned on a rifle that he had used to save the life of a woman who had crossed a continent to find him, and the wind came up the ridge clean, and did not smell of smoke for the first time in 14 hours. Wyatt came to Eleanor at the graveside. "Ma'am?" "Yes, Mr. Harlan." "They will come again." "I know it. Bigger this time. Vale will not lose 4 men and a foreman and let it stand." "No, sir? Then we do not wait for them." She looked at him. "You mean to ride to Vale's place?" "I mean to ride tonight. I mean to find him before he finds us. I mean to put an end to this thing on his ground, not on ours." "How many men do you take?" 3. "You, Doolin, me. Any more is a parade. Any less is a funeral." "You said me, sir." "I said you, ma'am." "Why?" "Because you are the only one of us he is afraid of." She did not answer. She did not have to. They rode at full dark. Doolin on a heavy bay, Wyatt on the sorrel, Eleanor on June. 3 riders down a ridge in the moonlight, and not one of them spoke for the length of the ride, because there was nothing left to say that had not been said in 11 minutes of fire on a porch the night before. Vale's ranch sat in a bowl. There was 1 road in. Wyatt knew a second. They took the second. They came up through a cottonwood draw at the back of the bunkhouse, and they tied the horses 200 yards out, and they crossed the last stretch on foot. A man stood up from a stump where he had been sitting in the dark with a rifle across his knees. He had been waiting. "Mr. Harlan." Wyatt stopped. Eleanor stopped beside him. Doolin stopped a step behind. The man on the stump struck a match. He lit a lantern at his feet. He raised the lantern. There were 6 men behind him. Vale walked out from between them. He had been waiting for an hour. "Mr. Harlan, Miss Whitaker, Mr. Doolin." He tipped his hat. "I have been expectin' you since sundown." Wyatt did not lift his rifle. He knew the count. "I want it understood," Vale said, "that I did not bring you here. You brought yourselves. The country will say I defended my ground. The country will be right." Vale. "Drop the rifles, Mr. Harlan. Drop them and the lady and the smith, now. Or I have my men kill all 3 of you where you stand, and I bury you in a draw, and no one in this valley ever knows what became of the woman who burned a paper in her parlor." A silence. Doolin breathed out slow. Wyatt set his rifle on the ground. Eleanor set hers beside it. Doolin set his beside hers. Vale's smile widened. "At first light, Miss Whitaker, I am going to hang the 3 of you from the cottonwood at the front gate of my own ranch, in plain view of any rider who comes down that road. I am going to leave you hangin' for a day, and then I am going to cut you down and let the coyotes have what is left. And by the time the territorial marshal hears about it, ma'am, there will not be a soul in this valley who will say what they saw. Do you know why?" She looked at him. "Why, Mr. Vale?" "Because they are cowards, ma'am." "You are wrong about that, Mr. Vale." "Am I?" "Yes, sir, you are." Behind them, on the ridge above the bowl, the first thin streak of gray had begun to come up the eastern sky. Vale did not look at it. He was a man who did not look at the sky. Eleanor looked at it. She looked at the gray light coming up over the rim, and she did not smile, because she would not give Vale that, but in the back of her chest, in the place where she had kept her mother's voice, and her father's worst words, and the cruel laugh of the man on the bench at the station, a small, clean thing was beginning to burn, because she had heard faint the sound that a man like Vale would not hear if it walked up to him and tipped its hat. Hooves. Many of them. Coming down the only road in. Vale heard them on the 3rd hoofbeat. His head came up. His hand went to his pistol. "Boys." The 6 men behind him cocked their weapons in a sound that was a small dry rattle and a large wet one. Eleanor did not turn. She kept her eyes on Vale because she had been told once by a woman who had survived a husband who drank that you watch a man's chest, not his hands, because the chest tells you what the hands are about to do. Vale's chest was rising fast. "How many?" he said. The man on the stump had stood up. He had the lantern in one hand and the rifle in the other, and he cocked his head, and he said low, "I count more than 10, sir." "Then count again." "More than 20, sir." Vale's jaw locked. Wyatt did not move. He had not moved since he set the rifle down. He was a man who knew how to be still in a way that most men did not know how to be alive. Doolin shifted his weight. Eleanor said very soft, so only Vale could hear Mr. Vale. "Quiet. Mr. Vale, sir, I would like you to know something if you will indulge me." "I said quiet, woman." "I would like you to know, sir, that you were wrong this morning. About cowards." His head whipped around. "Hold your tongue or I will—" "You will not, Mr. Vale. You will not do anything but stand on this ground and listen to the sound of every farmer and every widow and every shopkeeper in this valley ride down a road you thought was yours." The first horse cleared the bend. Samuel Boone. He sat the horse in a way no man should sit. A horse who had been on his feet for the first time in 10 days, but he sat it. His rifle was across the saddle bow. His hat was low. He was pale as ash, and the hand that held the reins shook, and he did not let it show. Behind him, 23 men, 4 women, a marshal. The marshal rode in the back of the column on a slow gray gelding, and he was not in a hurry because he had been waiting 6 months for a reason to come up this road, and he had it now in his coat pocket in the form of 3 signed statements that Eleanor Whittaker had not known had been written. They had been written in the room above Mrs. Reed's kitchen by women who had turned their backs in a store the day before, but had not after all gone home and slept. Samuel pulled up at the gate. He did not dismount. He raised his voice. "Ambrose Vale. Boone. Drop the rifles." A silence. Vale's 6 men looked at one another. The man on the stump set his lantern down very slowly. He did not set his rifle down. Vale laughed. The laugh was thin. "Sam, you cannot be serious. You have brought farmers. You have brought a marshal who has not made an arrest in this county since the war. You have brought your bride and a smith, and what a Mexican widow you think this country will hang me on the word of a Mexican widow." The marshal nudged the gray forward. He came up beside Samuel. He did not raise his voice. "Mr. Vale." "Marshal, I have a signed statement from Mrs. Anna Halloran identifying your foreman's horse at her place the morning of August 19th. I have a signed statement from Mr. Heinrich Doolin saying he watched you offer Sam Boone $400 for a claim worth $4,000. I have a signed statement from Mrs. Clara Reed, who keeps the books for 3 banks in this town and 1 in Bozeman, saying you have moved cash through her ledger in patterns that no honest cattleman has cause to move cash. And I have, sir, the body of a Mexican farmer named Esteban Mireles on a buckboard behind me with a bullet in him from a Colt that one of your men dropped on Sam Boone's porch last night. And that Colt has your name etched into the grip because your foreman is not a careful man and he was carrying your sidearm. Now I am going to ask you one time, Mr. Vale, to drop the rifle and step away from Miss Whittaker." A long, long silence. One of Vale's men dropped his rifle. Then another. Then a third. The man on the stump set his rifle down with the slow and final motion of a man who had not been paid enough to die. Vale did not drop his. He looked at Eleanor. His hand twitched on the grip. Wyatt moved. He moved faster than Eleanor had ever seen a man move, and he moved without speaking, and he put himself between her and Vale in the space of a breath, and his hand was on Vale's pistol arm before Vale had finished raising it. A shot went into the dirt. Vale was on the ground a moment after that with Wyatt's knee in his back and the marshal's irons coming out of a saddlebag, and Eleanor was standing where she had been standing, and she had not flinched, and she had not closed her eyes, and Samuel Boone was on the horse at the gate with tears coming down his face that he did not bother to wipe. "Eleanor?" "Yes, Samuel." "You all right, ma'am?" "I am, Samuel." "You sure?" "I am sure." He looked down at his hands on the reins. "I rode out at 2 in the morning, ma'am. I rode to every farm Wyatt did not. Some of them slammed the door. Most of them did not. There is a thing about a man on a horse in the dark, ma'am. He is hard to refuse. You should not have come. I should not have lived to come, ma'am. But I am here. And I would have come on my hands and knees, Eleanor, if June had been the last horse in the country." Eleanor did not speak. She could not. The marshal pulled Vale to his feet. He marched him to the buckboard where the body of Esteban Mireles lay covered with a blanket, and he set Vale down in irons beside that body, and he said in a voice that everyone in the bowl heard, "Ambrose Vale, you are under arrest for the murder of Mr. Mireles, for the arson of 2 cabins, for conspiracy to deprive citizens of land and water, and for, sir, making the worst miscalculation a man can make in this country, which is mistaken a woman who has nothing for a woman who can be moved." Vale did not answer. A man like Vale does not answer when a man like the marshal has finally found his voice. The trial took 4 days. Eleanor sat in the front row of the small courtroom every day. She wore the gray dress. She wore it because she had no other, and because the gray dress had walked into a hostile town once already and had not been turned away the second time, and a dress that had done that for a woman did not throw away. Mrs. Halloran testified. She sat in the chair, and she told the court about the gray horse with the white sock and the 4 men in masks, and the husband she had buried with her own hands behind a burned barn, and she did not weep until she said his name. And when she said his name, she wept, and the jury, which was 12 men of the territory, sat very still and did not look at one another. Doolin testified. The widow Morales testified through an interpreter, and her voice did not shake, and the lawyer at the defense table with the gold watch chain tried to interrupt her 3 times, and the judge silenced him every time with a look that did not need a hammer. Wyatt testified. He spoke for 9 minutes. He did not raise his voice. He told the court what he had seen at the porch and what he had seen at Vale's gate, and he did not embellish a thing because Wyatt Harlan was a man who did not know how to embellish and would not have if he had known. Eleanor testified last. She walked to the chair, the way she had walked to the boarding house, the way she had walked into the general store, the way her mother had walked into church, and she sat down and folded her hands in her lap. The lawyer for the territory asked her one question. Miss Whitaker, in your own words, ma'am, what happened on the porch of the Boone homestead on the night of August 22nd? She looked at the jury. She looked at the 12 men who had not yet decided what they thought of her, and she did not flinch. A boy was shot, she said. I knelt to stop the bleeding. A man came around the corner with a pistol. He was going to kill me. He was going to kill the boy after he killed me. I had no rifle in my hand. I had no defense. The man who fired the shot that saved my life was the man I came west to marry, who had not stood without help in 10 days, and who stood that night because a woman whose name he had written in a letter 9 months before was about to die on his porch. That, sir, is what happened. I have no more to add to it. The jury was out for 41 minutes. They came back with a guilty verdict on 3 counts. The judge sentenced Vale to 30 years in the territorial prison. Ambrose Vale did not look at Eleanor when he was let out. A man like Vale never looks at a woman after he has lost to her because if he looked, he would have to know. The valley was changed. Not healed. Changed. Esteban Morales was in the ground. Tom Halloran was in the ground. The Mexican widow had taken her grief and gone south to her people, and she had carried a bag of seed wheat that Eleanor had pressed on her at the door, and she had carried Eleanor's name in her mouth like a small clean stone. Tobias the boy walked with a limp. He would walk with it for the rest of his life. The Boone homestead had a new barn by the end of September, raised in 2 days by 16 men who had not known one another's first names a month before. The Halloran cabin was rebuilt by 12 men and 4 women on a piece of ground that Mrs. Halloran had cleared with her own hands. The general store in October took down a tin sign over the door that had read Pierce and put up a new one that read Doolin and Pierce. Because Mr. Doolin had bought into the store with $800 his wife had been keeping under a floorboard for 19 years against the day she might need to leave her marriage, and which she had decided in the end not to leave. Mrs. Doolin and Eleanor had coffee in the boarding house every Wednesday. Mrs. Doolin's mother, she said, would have approved. In the 2nd week of November, Samuel Boone asked Eleanor to sit with him on the front porch. He had a tin cup of coffee. She had her own. The wind was up, but the snow had not come, and the air had the high, clear bite of a country preparing for a winter it would survive. Eleanor. Yes, Samuel. I have been thinkin'. You have been thinkin' all month, sir. The whole valley has been askin' me what about. I have been thinkin' about the engagement, ma'am. She set her cup down. She did not speak. He took his hat off. He set it on his knee. He held it there with both hands, and he did not look at her. I am going to release you from it, Eleanor. A silence. Samuel? Hear me out, ma'am. All right. I wrote you 9 months ago because I was a sick man on a Phelan homestead, and I was afraid to die alone in this cabin. I wrote you with my best hand and my truest words. And I told you everything I had, which was not much, and I asked you to come, and you came. And ma'am, you came. You came, and you saved my life, and you saved this land, and you saved the lives of 6 neighbors, who would be in the ground beside Esteban if you had not stood up. You came, Eleanor. You did the thing I asked. Samuel. But ma'am, Eleanor, I have watched you for 3 months now, and you do not love me. And I want to be careful here because I want to say this right. You respect me. You honor me. You care for me as a sister cares for a brother she has chosen. And I will tell you, ma'am, I love you the same way back, and I would say so on a Bible in front of God, but it is not the love of a marriage, Eleanor, and you and I both know it. And a country like this is too hard to start a marriage on a thing that is not what it ought to be. Eleanor's eyes filled. She did not let them spill. Samuel Boone. Yes, ma'am. You are the best man I have known, sir. I am not, ma'am. You are. He smiled. It was a small, tired smile, and it was the smile of a man who had made a decision a long time before this porch and had been waiting for the right hour to say it. There is one thing more, ma'am. Yes. He reached into his coat. He took out a folded paper. He held it out. She took it. She opened it. It was a deed. A new deed. It had been drawn up by the lawyer in town, and it bore the lawyer's seal and the witness signatures of the Marshal and Mrs. Reed and Mr. Doolin. It transferred one half of the Boone homestead, including the well and the running water through the South Meadow, to Eleanor Whitaker of Philadelphia in fee simple, free of encumbrance, in consideration of services rendered and value contributed, which the law of the territory recognized as a binding consideration. She read it twice. Her hand shook. Samuel. It is yours, ma'am. You earned it. I have signed it. The Marshal has witnessed it. Mrs. Reed has stamped it. It cannot be undone. This is your land. It is half my land, ma'am. The other half is yours. You can sell it, or you can work it, or you can sit on it, and let the grass come up in the spring, and I will not say a word, because it is not mine to say a word about. Samuel, I cannot. You can, Eleanor. You will, because if you do not take this paper, ma'am, you will be telling me that what you did on that porch was a favor, and I will not be a man who took a favor from a woman who bled for me. Do you understand me, ma'am? She understood him. She folded the paper. She held it against her chest with both hands the way her mother had held a Bible. She did not speak for a long time. When she did, her voice was lower than she had ever spoken in it, and she said, Samuel Boone. If a woman could pick a brother out of the men of this country, sir, I would have picked you. I want you to know that. I know it, ma'am. And I will be on this land when you are an old man in a rocking chair, sir. And I will bring you broth, and I will sit with you, and you will not be alone. I know that too, ma'am. He put his hat back on. He stood up. He set his hand on the back of her chair for one moment lightly, and then he went into the cabin and shut the door behind him, and Eleanor sat on the porch alone with a folded deed against her chest, and watched a wind move down the valley that no longer belonged to a man named Vale. Wyatt found her there an hour later. He did not ask. He sat on the boards beside her chair with his back against the post, and he took his hat off, and he set it on the boards. Mr. Harlan. Ma'am. He released me. I figured. You figured. He told me last week, ma'am. He asked my opinion. I told him it was his to give, not mine. What else did you tell him? A long pause. I told him, ma'am, that any man who was the husband of Eleanor Whitaker would be the luckiest man between the Missouri and the Pacific, and that I did not believe Sam Boone was that man much as I respected him. And I told him also, ma'am, that I would not press my own suit while he held yours, because that is not the way a man does a thing in a country where a friend is a thing you do not throw away. Eleanor closed her eyes. She did not weep. She had finished weeping. The grief and the gratitude in her chest had not finished, and would not finish for a long time yet, but the weeping was done. Mr. Harlan. Yes. You said your own suit. I did, ma'am. You said it on the porch of another man's house, an hour after that man released me. I said it because I have not said it for 91 days, ma'am. I counted them. I started counting the night Sam told me. I did not say a thing to you because it was not mine to say. It is mine now, and I will not say it again until you ask me to, ma'am, because I do not believe a woman should be courted by a man before she has had a winter to be herself. A winter? A winter, ma'am. The snow will come in 2 weeks. The valley will go quiet. You will sit by your own fire on your own land that you signed for in your own name. You will be a woman with a deed, ma'am, and that is a thing you have never been. I want you to be that thing for a season before I ever ask you to be anything else." She opened her eyes. She looked at him. She did not reach for his hand, and he did not reach for hers. But the air between them moved the way the air moves when two people who have stood through the same storm sit down on the same porch. "Mr. Harlan?" "Yes, Eleanor." "In the spring, sir, you may ask me." "I will, ma'am." "And I will answer you." "I know, ma'am." He set his hat back on his head. He stood up. He did not touch her. He walked down the steps and across the yard to the new barn, where there was work to be done, because there is always work to be done on a country homestead going into winter, and that too is a kind of peace. Eleanor sat on the porch alone. She held the folded deed against her chest, a long way down the ridge on a piece of ground that had been burned and was now seeded for the spring. Mrs. Halloran's middle child was running with a stick, and the sound of his running carried up the slope thin and clean, and Eleanor Whitaker, who had stepped off a train 4 months before with $11.40 and no return ticket, and no name in this country, listened to a child run on land that no man could ever again take. And she understood finally what she had come west to find. It had not been a husband. It had been a deed, and the deed in her hands was her own. Winter came 2 weeks late. When it came, Eleanor was ready. She had cut and stacked 4 cords of pine. She had laid in flour, salt sugar coffee, 15 pounds of dried beans, 2 strings of onions, hanging from the rafters a side of bacon under salt in the cold pantry, and a tin canister of bullets for the rifle that had become hers, by use long before the deed had become hers by paper. She had not seen Wyatt in 3 weeks. He had ridden out the morning after the snow turned serious, because his own cabin was on the far side of the ridge, and a man with 1 room and 1 stove did not winter well with a woman across the valley, and he had said on the steps, "I will be by when the road is passable, ma'am, and not before." "Mr. Harlan?" "Yes, Eleanor." "You said spring." "I said spring, ma'am. A man checkin' on a neighbor in February is not askin' for a thing. He is keepin' a road open. Those are 2 different rides." She had let him go. Samuel was in the cabin across the dog trot. He had moved into the smaller of the 2 rooms after the deed was signed because he had said he would not sleep in a room next to a sister, and Eleanor had said she would not have it the other way, and that was where the matter had rested. She passed him a tin cup of coffee at dawn every day. He passed her one back at dusk. It was not a marriage. It was something better in its way, because it had been chosen twice over. In the first week of January, Mrs. Halloran's middle child took a fever. The boy was 4. He had been running with a stick in the autumn on land Eleanor had watched him claim with his small dirty boots. A neighbor came on horseback through 3 feet of snow at 1 in the morning. The neighbor's name was Jenkins. He had been one of the men who had ridden behind Samuel to Vale's gate. He pounded on the door of the cabin, and Eleanor was up and dressed in 2 minutes. "Mrs. Halloran is askin' for you, ma'am." "How bad?" "Bad, ma'am. The fever come on at supper. By midnight he was talking to people who weren't there." "My coat. Tell Samuel I'm gone. I will be back when I'm back." She rode through snow that had not yet been broken. June knew the road. June had been to the Halloran place 6 times. Eleanor did not weep, did not pray, did not speak, because the wind would have taken the words and frozen them, and a woman who used her breath on words she did not need was a woman who did not arrive. She arrived. She sat by the boy for 9 hours. She fed him broth in spoonfuls. She wiped his face with snow water. She kept Mrs. Halloran on her feet by sending her every hour to do a thing that did not need doing, because a mother who is sent to fetch a clean cloth is a mother who is not in the chair by the bed counting her child's breaths. The boy's fever broke at 4 in the afternoon. Mrs. Halloran sat down on the floor and put her face in her apron and made a sound that was not crying and was not laughing and was a thing in between that only mothers make. Eleanor put her hand on the woman's shoulder. She did not speak. She did not need to. When she rode back through the snow at dusk, Wyatt was at the cabin. He had come over the ridge on snowshoes. He had a sack of dried apples in one hand and a piece of news in the other that he had ridden 3 miles in bad weather to deliver, and his face was raw with cold, and there was ice in his beard. "Mr. Harlan." "Eleanor." "You said February." "I lied, ma'am." She did not smile. She did, but only with her eyes. "The boy. He will live." "I knew you would say that." "How?" "Because I have known you 4 months, ma'am. You do not ride home from a dying child. You ride home from a living one." "What is your news, Mr. Harlan?" He held out the folded paper. She took it. She unfolded it. It was a letter from the Territorial Court at Helena. It was addressed to Miss Eleanor Whitaker Boone, Homestead, Yellow Ridge. It informed her that Ambrose Vale's attorney had filed a motion to set aside the deed transferring half the Boone homestead on the grounds that the transfer had been made under duress, in consideration of services not properly valued in law, and to a woman not lawfully married to the grantor, and therefore lacking the standing of a wife. Eleanor read the letter twice. She folded it. She set it on the table. She did not raise her voice. "Mr. Harlan?" "Yes, Eleanor." "He cannot win this." "He cannot, ma'am. The lawyer for the territory says he cannot. Mrs. Reed says he cannot. The judge himself has said in chambers that he cannot." "Then why is he trying?" "Because, ma'am, he wants you to spend the winter afraid. He cannot reach you any other way. He is in a cell in Helena, and he has 30 years to fill, and a man like Vale will fill 30 years writing letters to lawyers and trying to take back the one thing that beat him. He cannot take it back, but he can try. Then I will let him try. Ma'am, I will let him write his letter. I will answer it. I will go to Helena in March if the court calls me. I will stand in front of any judge in this territory, and I will tell him what I told the jury, and I will hold up the deed, and I will not blink, sir. And then I will come home, and I will plant the South Meadow, and I will not give Mr. Vale in his cell the gift of 1 hour of fear." Wyatt looked at her. He set the sack of dried apples on the table. "Eleanor." "Yes, I rode 3 miles in bad weather to tell you a man in a cell had written a letter. I will not do it again." "You will not need to, sir." "No, ma'am, I will not." They sat at the table for an hour. He drank coffee. She did not. He told her 3 stories about the war that he had never told another living person, and she listened, and she did not ask questions, and when he stood up to leave, he set his hand on the doorframe and looked at her without his hat on for the first time since the night she had met him, and he said, "Eleanor." "Yes. I'm going to ask you in April." "You said spring." "April is spring, ma'am, in the parts of spring that count." "Then I will be here in April, Mr. Harlan." "Yes, ma'am." He went. In March, the snow began to give. Eleanor traveled to Helena. She would not let Samuel come. He had grown stronger over the winter, but he was not a man who should ride 300 miles in March, and she said so. And Samuel did not argue, and she rode out with the marshal and Mrs. Reed as company, because the marshal had business with the court, and Mrs. Reed had business with a bank, and Eleanor had business with the man in the cell who had decided to take one more shot. The hearing took less than an hour. The lawyer for Vale argued. The judge listened with the patience of a man being polite to a debt collector at his own door. Mrs. Reed produced ledgers. The marshal produced the witness signatures. Eleanor produced the deed unfolded. It set it on the bench and stepped back without a word. The judge did not even retire. He ruled from the bench. Motion denied. Costs to the petitioner. Any further filing in this matter to be summarily dismissed on receipt. Vale was not in the courtroom. He had asked to be brought. The warden had said no. The warden was a man named Hollis, the brother of the station master, who had first told Eleanor in August that her intended had not been seen in 3 weeks, and the warden, like his brother, had begun to understand that the country was a different country than it had been a year before. Eleanor walked out of the courthouse into the March mud. The marshal tipped his hat. "Miss Whitaker." "Marshal." "It is over, ma'am." "It is over, sir. Go home and plant your meadow, ma'am." "I intend to, sir." She rode home with Mrs. Reed and the marshal, and on the second day of the ride, when they camped by a thaw creek, Mrs. Reed reached into her saddlebag and took out a small object wrapped in cotton. She handed it to Eleanor. Eleanor unwrapped it. It was a ring. It was not new. It was old and worn, and the gold was thin at the band, where many hands had worn it over many years. There was a small chip in the stone, which was a garnet dark as a dried cherry. Clara. It was my mother's child. I cannot. You can, Eleanor. This is yours. It has been mine for 31 years. I have not married. I will not marry. The ring has been in a drawer in a town where it has not belonged. I have watched you for 9 months, child. I want it in a house where it does belong. And I want it on the finger of a woman who paid a price for it I never had to pay. Eleanor's eyes filled. She held the ring in her palm. Mrs. Reed. Clara, child. Clara. Yes. I will wear it. I know you will, child. Wyatt asked her on the second Sunday in April. He did not kneel. Eleanor would not have liked it if he had. He came up the steps of the porch after church, which neither of them had attended, and he took his hat off, and he held it against his chest the way Samuel had held his hat in November. Eleanor. Mr. Harlan. I have been counting days again, ma'am. How many? 138, ma'am. And what do you have to say at the end of them, sir? That I love you, Eleanor Whittaker. I have loved you since the night you said you would die somewhere that might become yours. I would have loved you, ma'am, if you had married Sam Boone and lived next door to me for 40 years and never spoken to me again. I will love you, ma'am, whether you take my name or do not take my name, and whether you wear my ring or wear another, and whether you are the wife of a man on this ridge or the widow of one. I have come to ask you, ma'am, if you will marry me. But I have not come to ask you to be less Eleanor than the woman who held a boy's leg and burned a paper and rode to Helena to face down a man in a cell. I will not ask you to be less, ma'am, ever, and that is a thing I will sign on a paper of its own, if you ask me to. Eleanor did not answer at once. She looked at her hands. She turned the garnet ring on her finger once. She looked up. Mr. Harlan? Yes. I will marry you. He breathed out. He had been holding it for 138 days. But, sir. Yes, ma'am. The deed stays in my name. It does, ma'am. My half of this land stays my half. If we are blessed with a child, that child inherits from me what is mine, and from you what is yours. And the two halves do not merge until the second of us is buried. Yes, ma'am. And I will be called Eleanor Whittaker until the day I die, sir. I will sign Whittaker on every paper. I will be Mrs. Harlan in a church and in a parlor and on a calling card, and I will be glad of it. But on a deed and in a court and on a ballot, sir. If this territory ever lets a woman near one, I will be Eleanor Whittaker, because that is the name that walked off a train in August and is the name that walked into a courthouse in March, and I will not bury that name under another, even yours. Yes, Eleanor. You agree, sir? I agreed before you said it, ma'am. I would have asked for it myself if you had not. She rose from the chair. She did not weep. She had finished weeping in November. She held out her hand. He took it. His hand was warm in a way she had not expected. The hand of a man who had crossed 2 wars and 20 years of solitude was a hand that was still warm, and Eleanor in that moment understood that the country had not killed it out of him. And that was the thing she had come west to find, without knowing she had come to find it. They were married on the porch of the homestead in the second week of May. The preacher was a circuit man who had not asked questions. Samuel gave the bride away, walking 3 steps from the cabin door with her hand on his arm, and he did not weep, but his mouth shook once when he laid her hand in Wyatt's, and Eleanor saw it and squeezed his fingers once before she let him go. Clara Reed stood up with Eleanor. Doolan stood up with Wyatt. Mrs. Halloran was there with her 3 children. Mrs. Doolan was there. Tobias, the boy, stood next to his mother on a leg that would always be shorter than the other, and looked at Eleanor like a sister because she had bandaged him on a porch on a night he would remember for the rest of his life. There were 32 people in the yard. A year before on a train, Eleanor had counted 4 people in her life. A dead mother, a father who had thrown her out, a woman in a tenement who had paid her 8 cents an hour, and a man on a piece of paper whose face she had never seen. She had not counted the fact that those 4 were not all of them. Now she stood on a porch she owned half of with a ring on her hand that a woman had given her with a husband whose name she would not be taking and who had not asked her to, and she looked at 32 faces in a yard, and she did not weep. But the weather inside her chest was a clean and steady thing, and she knew her mother would have known it for what it was because her mother had known weather. 18 months after that wedding, on a hot August afternoon, a train pulled into the station at Yellow Ridge. The station was not what it had been. There was a depot now. There was a freight office painted white. There was a sign above the platform that read, Yellow Ridge Pop. 314, and the 314 had been written over a crossed-out 287, which had been written over a crossed-out 211, which had been written over the crossed-out original 96, and somewhere under all of them was the number that had been there the day Eleanor Whitaker had stepped off a different train into a dust she had thought at the time was the dust of her own grave. A young woman stepped off the train. She was alone. She had a carpet bag. She was Eleanor Judge from the boardwalk where she had been waiting, no older than 22. She wore a brown traveling dress that had been ironed too many times. She held the carpet bag with both hands the way a woman holds a thing she cannot afford to drop. She looked up and down the platform. No one came for her. Eleanor stepped down from the boardwalk. She crossed the dust the way her own boots had crossed it once 14 months before, with a chin she did not let drop, and a back she did not let bend. She walked up to the young woman. She set her own hand on the young woman's carpet bag lightly, the way Clara Reed had once set a hand on hers. "Ma'am." "Yes." "You waitin' on somebody?" The young woman's eyes filled. She did not let it spill. "I was, ma'am." "And he is not here?" "No, ma'am." "What is your name, child?" Margaret Ellis from Pittsburgh." Margaret Ellis from Pittsburgh. "My name is Eleanor Harlan, born Whitaker of the Ridge. I came off a train at this station last August in a gray dress with $11.40 in my reticule, and the man who was supposed to meet me did not come. I went home with a woman named Clara Reed. I am going to take you home with me tonight. You will sleep under my roof. You will eat what is in my pot. Tomorrow we will find out about the man who did not come, and we will see what is to be done. And you will not, ma'am, be alone in this country for 1 hour. Do you hear me?" Margaret Ellis did not speak. She nodded. Eleanor took the carpet bag. She walked the young woman down the platform and across the dust and up to the wagon, where June was standing harnessed and patient, and 17 years old now, and gray around the muzzle, and she helped the young woman up onto the seat, and she climbed up beside her, and she lifted the reins. She did not look back at the men on the bench outside the freight office. There were no men on the bench. There had been a bench once. The town had taken it out the spring after the trial, because the new mayor, who was Mr. Doolin, had said that a bench at a station was a thing for restin', and not a thing for watchin', and a town that did not understand the difference was a town that would not grow. Eleanor clicked her tongue. June stepped forward. On the front porch of the new schoolhouse, 3 girls came running out at the dismissal bell, and one of them was Mrs. Halloran's daughter, and one of them was Mrs. Doolin's niece, and one of them was a small dark-haired child with her mother's straight back and her father's slate-gray eyes and her grandmother's name, which was Margaret Whitaker. Harlan, 11 months old at the wedding, and now 2 years and 4 months and walking. And she ran for her mother's wagon on a pair of legs that had been born on land. Her mother had bled for, and Eleanor Whitaker Harlan, who had once been told by her father in Philadelphia that she was a burden and ought to find herself a husband, before her face stopped being worth feeding, leaned down and lifted her daughter onto the seat between her and a frightened young woman from Pittsburgh. Margaret Ellis. "Ma'am, this is my daughter. She is also Margaret. There will be 2 of you in my kitchen tonight. She is 2. You are 22. You will each in your way be a comfort to the other." Margaret Ellis put her hand over her mouth. She did not weep in the end, because Eleanor had not wept on her first night, and the women of the Ridge had a way of learning in the first hour which way the wind blew at the new house. But she let out one long, shaking breath that she had been holding for 4 days on a train. Eleanor lifted the reins. She turned the wagon toward the road that ran up the ridge to a homestead that had 2 cabins now, and a new well house and a fenced south meadow that had brought in $1,000 in wheat the autumn before, and a barn that 23 men and 4 women had raised in 2 days. The September she had buried a Mexican farmer who had died firing his rifle from her south corner. She did not look back. She did not need to. Eleanor Harlan, who had been Eleanor Whitaker, who had come off a train in August of 1882 with a carpetbag and a stranger's broken promise, and no return ticket and no name in this country, drove a wagon up a road that had her name on it in the deed book of the territory, with her daughter on her knee, and a frightened young woman beside her, who would in a year be married to Tobias the boy with the limp, and would name her own first daughter Eleanor. She had not come west for a husband. She had not come west for a wedding. She had not come west for a name a man could put over her own. She had come west, although she had not known it on the train, to find out what she was made of when there was no one left to tell her. And the answer had come up out of the ground of a ridge that no man would ever again take from her. And the answer was the woman driving the wagon. And the woman driving the wagon was Eleanor. She was a landowner. She was a mother. She was a wife by choice, and a sister by choice, and a neighbor by choice. She was in the last and the truest count herself, and no man living or dead or yet to come down that road would ever again take that from her, because she had built it with her own 2 hands on land she had paid for in blood and dust, and the slow, steady work of 1,000 mornings, and the deed to it was in her name, and the name was Eleanor. And Eleanor in this country had become a thing that the wind itself could not blow down.